Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. I hope you're cooling off in here today. I'm really happy to welcome Paul Jones from Care Concierge. That's okay, you can applaud. Who's going to talk to us all about the third way to approach senior living, assisted living. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me. My name is Paul Jones, and I am the owner of the Care Concierge Senior Living Advisors. So just a little quick thing about me, and then we'll dive right into the presentation. And then the presentation itself shouldn't be very long. It should only be maybe 20, 25 minutes. The real advantage of this presentation is that I want to give you all the opportunity to ask as many questions as you'd like, because healthcare in general is confusing. This part of healthcare is almost purposely opaque. And I first learned that when I was working in assisted living and memory care buildings. So I started back in the day. Actually, Debbie and I first met when I was working in assisted living buildings. I was a memory care director to start with. Then I did sales for a little while, and then I was an executive director. And while I was an executive director and also a sales director and other things, I was also on dialysis. And about a year into my tenure of being an executive director, I got the call from MGH. They said, "Hey, we have a kidney. Would you like one?" Well, yes, I would. Thank you very much. And so I got my kidney transplant. Thank you. Thanks very much. Yeah, I got my kidney transplant, and it's been 7 years now, which is just awesome. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, hey, I'm chasing after his footsteps, son. Thank you. While I was out recovering from my kidney transplant surgery, I started reflecting on what I thought about the senior care industry, a lot of its strengths, and a lot of the things that I didn't like about it. I saw a lot of corporatization in care. I saw a lot of commodification of care. I would be sitting in on meetings where we would be talking about people in ways that I just couldn't agree with. And so I started wrestling with this idea of, what do I want to really do with my life in the context of senior care and senior living? And then my boss called me and said, "Hey, bad news. Our company is shrinking a little bit. So you can either float around and be an executive director going from building to building, or you can take a layoff." I was like, well, geez, I don't really believe in signs, but this is got to be one of them, right? So I took a layoff, took a little time, took $20, put it into a bank account, and said, let's see what happens. And I started the Care Concierge, because what I want to do more than anything else is give people an opportunity to find what's going to be the best option as they're getting older. Now, this could be assisted living and memory care. This is what we primarily help people with, but it could be other things too. It could be home care. It could be finding an elder law attorney. It could be finding what's the difference between palliative care and hospice. It could be so many different things. And I wanted people to always have the opportunity to call us and say, we don't know what to do, but can you help us? And the answer is always going to be yes. And that philosophy has worked out so far. We're now in 3 states and growing. We're franchising nationwide. It's why I look like this. My hair is slowly shrinking away. But back to our primary mission where we really started and where I really started was trying to help people navigate the different senior care and living options in Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Connecticut. And the most common avenue of care that people have is assisted living. But it's not always how it was. And I am, hold on. All right. So today, what we're going to talk about is, what is assisted living? How did it start? You'd be surprised how relatively recent assisted living is as a form of care. Is it like a nursing home? It's the number one question I get from people. Is this a nursing home? And what I think a lot of people in this room may be having in the back of their heads is this question: how do you pay for it? And we will talk about the different ways that people can pay for assisted living, and then almost as important, if not more important, how they can age in place successfully where they are. So what is assisted living? This is a ton of text, by the way. So feel free to read it if you want or you can. If you can't, I did send the slides to Debbie. You are all more than welcome to ask her to print out slides for you. Or if you want to reach out to me later, I can email you the slides. Grab my card before you leave. But basically, assisted living defines a residence which supports people 24 hours a day with their activities of daily living, their ADLs. Now, these are things that we may all take for granted as things we can just do normally throughout the day. I can get dressed in the morning. I can take a shower on my own. I can take my own medications. But for some people, as they get older, these things may slow down, or through no fault of their own, they had a fall, they had a stroke, they had some acute incident that happened. They can no longer do these things as easily or as rapidly as they'd like to. And so assisted living can step in to help support people as they're trying to get through their day-to-day activities of daily living. So an assisted living community is not a nursing home. We're going to talk about this a little bit more today. And you might hear me repeat some things over and over again. This is one of those things. Assisted living is not a nursing home, but it was created in response to how people feel about nursing homes. And we'll get back to that in just a minute. So an assisted living is what's called a social model community setting, which means that it has a focus on supportive and enriching activities. It has that care focus. It has care staff on site 24 hours a day, but it's not as in your face with the medical help as you might find in a nursing home or a more acute environment. Most importantly, there are constant and consistent social opportunities for its residents. A senior center like this has a lot of the same functions that you'll find in an assisted living property. The difference is the senior center closes at a certain time of day, whereas the assisted living continues and is operating 24 hours a day. So if you like what you're finding in the senior center model, you might be surprised to find how much of this you'd see in an assisted living environment as well. Now, assisted living communities will typically have levels of care associated with its offered programs so that residents can age in place in the community. This is a big difference between 55 plus or independent living and assisted living. Independent living does not give people any care services, whereas assisted living has the opportunity for people to scale up through care needs to a really surprising amount of care that people may need. The point of this is to give people the chance to age in place where they are. And look, I don't know if anybody in this room has ever looked for an assisted living before or helped anybody who has, but it is a process. It can feel a little bit like drinking water out of a fire hose if you're starting to look for an assisted living. So if we can help you not have to replicate that process later on, that's going to be one of our priorities. So where did assisted living come from? Because it's a relatively recent invention. And to figure that out, we have to go a little bit further back. So here in Massachusetts, the first of what is now an assisted living property were in places like Goddard House in Brookline or Providence House in Boston. And these started as retirement communities or what they called homes for the aged. They didn't have the same type of function or form that you have in today's modern assisted living environments. Like here in Walpole, you might be familiar with New Pond Village right down the street or something like that. That's your traditional assisted living environment now. Now, a lot of sources will vary as to exactly when assisted living started in the United States. And hilariously, there are like 3 different companies in Massachusetts that all say they were the first ones to start assisted living. Okay. But sometime between the late 1970s and the mid 1980s is when assisted living started in a really protean type of form. And it started as a reaction to skilled nursing facilities, what we commonly now call nursing homes. Now, the nursing homes really started booming in the wake of Medicare and Medicaid being things here in the United States. And why that's so important is because this was an instance of business reacting to the government's movements. And when Medicare, as an example, became a government program, there was all of a sudden a big push for this opportunity for people to go to these nursing homes that were popping up and taking advantage of Medicare or Medicaid money. The problem is there weren't a lot of structures in place that were able to function as these nursing homes. And so what was happening is that there were buildings that were being repurposed to be nursing homes throughout the United States. Can anyone take a quick guess as to what those buildings might have been? That's okay. Good guess, hospitals. And actually in that same vein, yes, but specific type of hospitals or places that were called by some people or commonly called sanatoriums or asylums. Psychiatrics, that's right. There's a very clear picture that people have in their mind when they think about nursing homes. And I bet you're thinking of it without me having to describe it to you. And this is largely in part because nursing homes started coming up over the bones of these buildings that were not quite equipped for the most comfortable version of care. And so this idea of what a nursing home is started very early. And as nursing homes reacted to this backlash that they were getting and saying, no, we get it, we understand, we maybe should have cleaned things up and changed things around before welcoming patients in, new nursing homes started being built. But overall, there was this clinical aspect of care in the nursing home environments, which was, for the people that needed it, really good. If you need a nursing home and you need that clinical level of care, nursing homes are a great option. But if you don't need that clinical option and you just find yourself in a nursing home environment, it can feel very restrictive. It can feel very scary. It can feel very unnecessary. And so that backlash started to grow to the point where now you have people that will say nursing home like a pejorative and say, ooh, nursing home, don't want that. And I understand. Whatever you're feeling and related to what a nursing home is, that's valid. That's a feeling that's been built up over a number of years of seeing and hearing things or reading stories in the newspaper about things that have legitimately happened. Now, care at home is also not a perfect model, right? And there is no perfect model, but care at home can sometimes be substituted by people in their minds as, well, that's the magic bullet. That's what we're going to need. But the problem is that care at home, in order to be successful, really depends on how well your home or the home is set up to welcome care into the home. So I have some folks that I'm working with in a city north of here. They have a beautiful home, but they have very narrow staircases. They have an older home that's very difficult for them as they're getting older to navigate. And they're at the point now where they don't even use the second story of their home. Everything they have is on the ground floor. They've moved their bedroom to the dining room. They've moved, everything else into the kitchen or the living room, and it's all just very cramped and crowded. And they have care coming into the home, but the care services aren't providing that thing that they're really looking for, which is quality of life. And that's another big thing that's important to consider. Whatever you're considering or whatever you may in the future be helping somebody consider in terms of their next steps, what's going to be that best quality of life for them and what's going to help them age in place. So for some people, home care is the answer. That's the quality of life they want. They want to be able to be in their home. They want to get up in the morning, look out in their backyard. They don't care about going up and down the stairs in the house anymore. They want in their home. That's their quality of life. Great. Let's do that. But the aging in place question becomes a big problem there too, because home care is usually only supplying one person for that case. And so it can be tough if that person calls out and they don't have a replacement or anything like that, and you're still having that life enrichment conversation. So because that was happening, where you had home care that wasn't able to fulfill the life enrichment goals and they weren't quite fitting in with all the houses that people have out there, and then you had skilled nursing, which was almost overkill for some people because they didn't need all that much level of care and it still wasn't the environment they were seeking, assisted living started popping up. And assisted living was created to be this hybrid model of housing, which incorporates limited medical services throughout the day, 24 hours a day. There are certified nursing assistants, home health aides, and in some cases, licensed nurses 24/7, supporting people with their care needs. But these are purpose-built home-like apartments and social spaces throughout the building which residents can enjoy. It's getting really elaborate out there with some of the assisted living buildings, right? I don't know if you've seen any recently, but there are some out there now with like rock wall gyms and jacuzzis and pickleball courts and giant theaters and a couple with boxing rings, which I ask, really, what's that for? But it's getting really, really elaborate. And people will now see an assisted living and they'll turn to me and say, geez, this is like a cruise ship, you know? And so that is what this hybrid model has started becoming. So some key differences between assisted living and skilled nursing, and I also have some material on the table there, which is a little rack card with a little difference between assisted living and nursing homes as well. So assisted living is your social or community model. And in fact, you'll hear me say community, community, community. That's because in the assisted living industry, these buildings are commonly referred to as communities and not facilities. Whereas the skilled nursing model is commonly referred to as a facility setting because it does embrace that it's a more of a medical model setting. You have more people there to support with care needs, but there isn't such an emphasis on things like dining programs, activity programs, things like that. Now, in the assisted living model, you typically have private apartments with some apartments are companion style, which are shared apartments. You'd have a roommate. These roommate settings are typically, you get your own apartment and bathroom, roommate gets their own apartment and bathroom, and it's a shared common space. So that's how it's typically shaking out as a companion style now. In the nursing home environment, these are typically companion style rooms. Now, nursing homes, to be fair, are really trying to move away from the companion style rooms, and they're trying to embrace more private rooms for people. But because the acute need for nursing homes can be so great, they still zero in on people sharing that one big room that they're in with the curtain between them. Activity spaces can vary in the assisted livings, which, as I mentioned, can be borderline ridiculous depending. I mean, boxing rings and all this stuff. It can get pretty elaborate with what's out there. And in the skilled nursing facilities, the activity spaces are usually limited. Again, that's not a bad thing. It's just this is the difference. There's a freedom of movement in visitors with assisted living. This is a big surprise for people with assisted living. Most people ask me, all right, what's the visiting hours for assisted living? There are no visiting hours. You come and go as you please. You go when you want to go. You know, I heard somebody, as I was walking around the crowd before, mentioning that, you know, hey, people would just get up and go and hop in the car and hit the road. You know, right. And that's okay. In an assisted living environment, all you ever need to do is just sign out at the front desk. So if there's a fire alarm, they know not to look for you. That's it. In a nursing home, it's a much different perspective, right? Because you're there for medical care, usually especially at the start, under the advisory of a doctor. You know, the signing in and out, that can be a lot different. And visitors may only be allowed to come at certain times of day. In assisted living, there's limited on-site and visiting medical services. So this is another thing that's becoming a little more prevalent over the last, especially couple of years since the COVID lockdowns. More and more assisted living communities are embracing having primary care physicians, podiatrists, dental service, geriatric psychiatrists, physical therapy and occupational therapy, and other services being able to come on site to support people with their needs. Especially in the context of primary care, this is becoming rapidly one of the number one or two things that people are talking to me about when they're calling me asking about assisted living, because it's becoming so difficult to find a primary care physician. And if they've been living in their community for a long time and they have these acute needs and now their doctor is retiring or moving to another state, and it's going to be a 10-month wait before they can see their new primary care physician. I've had some people decide to reach out and go for an assisted living property so that they know they have a guaranteed spot with their primary care physician on site. It's not something I predicted was going to be a criteria for looking at assisted living, but this is what it's become now. There are round-the-clock medical services available in skilled nursing, and each skilled nursing facility will have its own medical director as well. In assisted living, care services are scalable, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Whereas in nursing home, it's pretty much just that one full scope of care. So, and then in terms of assisted living and home care, I alluded to some of these things too. There's multiple staff on site in an assisted living, and it's usually one or two of the same caregivers for home care. This is the biggest thing, right? And this is also the biggest thing one of the biggest things I talk to with families about when they're starting to call and look for help is I say, talk me through your day. And they tell me about what they've been doing to support their loved one in the home, especially if their loved one has any sort of memory care needs. And as they talk through with me what they need, I stop and I say, you are an entire assisted living team unto yourself. And what is that doing to you? And then I talk through what an assisted living team does and all the different departments they have. And they go, yeah, geez, I've been doing all of that. So assisted livings have their own teams that will fulfill the needs of the person or the people living there. And then we talked a little bit about the engagement. There is an opportunity to meet peers in assisted livings, especially if you go into an assisted living in your town that you've lived in for a long time. Very often people will find that they walk in and they go, geez, George, how long have you been living here? I moved in 3 months ago. Oh, for God's sake. Happens more often than you think. And it becomes this big social environment. And there's a lot of... it turns into a party zone pretty quick. I'm not going to lie to you. Has anyone seen the Netflix show Man on the Inside yet? That's not so. That's a little more documentary than people realize. It's a great show. Travel opportunities are more prevalent for assisted living over home care, and downsizing can be overwhelming in assisted living. That's a true story. Downsizing can be overwhelming. So that's one of the cons for assisted living in relation to home care. So what are the different types of assisted living? So there's independent living, which my photos aren't showing up too well, but this gentleman's supposed to be playing pool. So this is great for people who are tired of maintaining a home. They're planning for the future, but they're sick of raking their leaves. They don't want to mow the lawn anymore. They don't want to deal with the home ownership issues. Most communities will allow you to acquire assisted living services later on if you need, but some communities that bill themselves as independent living do not offer care services. So be very careful if you or someone you know is starting to look for independent living, but you think that they may be on that, cusp. Maybe 6 months or a year and a half from now, they're going to need care services. If they're going to an independent living now to get used to this idea of being in a community, that's a great idea. But if they're going there and then they require care services and then they're forced to move, that's not going to be the greatest thing for their quality of life. Some independent living providers, by the way, do ask for a buy-in as opposed to a month-to-month lease. Most assisted living properties are month-to-month leases, whereas independent living properties vary. Some of them require you to put down, like you're buying a home, and then you get some of that back if you move out, but it's just some people get surprised. They go through a whole process with independent living, and then right at the end, they're told, oh, by the way, that's X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars. So don't get caught flat-footed with that. And then there's traditional assisted living. I say traditional in quotes because just lack of a better term. So I won't belabor the point, but this is for people who require assistance with their activities of daily living throughout the day. In Massachusetts, the top 3 activities of daily living people require assistance with are bathing, walking, I'll explain that in a sec, and dressing. Walking is just helping walk with somebody to make sure they're not going to fall. People who are having balance issues, especially if they've just had a recent surgery, this is a huge need for people and a huge reason why people do move into a community setting. Now, as of 2023, which is the last time we have the most up-to-date data, there were 272 assisted living properties in the state. More than 60% provide podiatry on site. More than half provide dentistry on site, and more than 2/3 provide pharmacy services on site. Now, here's a statistic that I just updated for this presentation, which did surprise me a little bit. But 43% of the people living in an assisted living community has some form of dementia, and that is an increase since 2016. There's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, there's over 100 different types of dementia disorders that have been identified now. And Alzheimer's disease accounts for 60%, roughly, but then there are a whole lot of other diseases that are out there that classify as a dementia disorder or a memory disorder. I do another presentation on, memory care and dementia disease and all of that. So if you folks really want a feel-good conversation, I can come back and do that. But, just keep in mind that this number is so high primarily because a lot of people wait a very long time to go into an assisted living, sometimes a little bit longer than maybe they should. And isolation is one of those things that absolutely, unequivocally causes people to have a cognitive decline. So if people have been alone at home for a while and you're noticing they're starting to slip, trust your instincts. That's a thing. Invite them here to the center. This is good medicine to come here, and be around other people. This is something that people can do, what you're doing today, to help stave off being part of that number. This also lumps in something called mild cognitive impairment and also much, much more mild forms of dementia. So I wonder if the number is a little inflated, but that is the number we have. And that does take us into memory care. So memory care is a type of care service in which people can live in an assisted living environment in a secured or unsecured environment, depending on the level of care they require, and they have more oversight. That's one of the primary drivers of somebody moving into a memory care community or memory care neighborhood or program, is they just need a little more oversight and guidance throughout the day with their activities of daily living. So Alzheimer's is the 7th leading cause of death in the United States. Right now, what is undisputable is that there are more than 135,000 people in Massachusetts with Alzheimer's dementia. And that's from the Alzheimer's Association's fact sheet as of yesterday. More than 200,000 Massachusetts residents provide 252 million hours of unpaid care for their loved ones, which is $6.7 billion of value if you were to be charging money for that. Now, all of that is enough cause for pause, but this is, for me, one of the scariest portions of this whole slide is more than 50% of those caregivers have their own chronic health conditions, which means that, and I deal with this every day, I deal with families who will call me and say, my loved one has Alzheimer's or Lewy bodies or Parkinson's or something like that. But besides that, they're fit as a fiddle. I have CHF, I have COPD, I have diabetes, I have all of these things. So I'm worried what's going to happen with me and then what's going to happen with my loved one if I'm not here anymore. And that drives a lot of conversations. And that unfortunately drives a lot of urgent conversations that happen later on if something changes. So what these assisted living communities have done is they've designed some means to give people a break, give people a respite, give people a place that their loved ones can go and receive really good care in an environment that emphasizes sensory-based programming, that emphasizes a much tighter care ratio, so it would be more staff members for each resident. And when I say sensory-based programming, by the way, just a quick aside about that. If you ever get the chance to visit an assisted living program in the future and you take a look at memory care, you may walk onto the memory care neighborhood if they have one. And you may find yourself a little bit put off by what you're looking at in the activities department. You might see folks doing things that are a little simple in terms of the activities. It's not designed to make people feel like infants or anything like that. But a lot of these memory care programs are designed to create no-fail programming for people so they aren't discouraged if they can't remember a trivia question or something like that. But also to give them things that they can do that are going to be sensory in nature and not invite them to have to try and dig memories up. So it's going to be a lot of art programs, a lot of cooking programs, a lot of things like that. So just a quick aside about that. Now, some assisted livings are designed exclusively for the memory impaired, which means every person there has memory disorder of some type, and every part of the building is designed to minimize anxieties that people may have related to their dementia disease and maximize the engagement to make sure that they're getting care and getting good quality of life throughout the day. All right, here's the big one. Okay. Everyone just sat up a little bit straighter. I saw it. So how much does it cost? Not great. So here in the state of Massachusetts, the average amount of money people spend on assisted living per month is $9,000, give or take. It's a lot of money for 1 month. 1 month. So let's talk about what's in that number. In that number is the base rent of the apartment, 3 meals a day, utilities, taxes, other fees, and I've also lumped care costs into this as well. So this is the average cost that people are spending on assisted living per month, including the care here in the state of Massachusetts. Now, depending on the property you go to, depending on the style of apartment you pick, you could be looking at more, you could be looking at less. But I want to not sugarcoat any of this stuff. It's an expensive proposition for senior care. This is home health care. So the average cost of home health aides monthly. Now, to extrapolate it out, this is 12 hours of care per day, 7 days per week. So if somebody needed care from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, and they wanted to stay in their home, and they needed the help of a home health aide, this is the average cost they'd be looking at. Obviously, if somebody needed less, if somebody only needed 4 hours a day, this would be much less. But a lot of people who I talk with who do require care services do need a significant level of care, right? They do either now or they're going to need that in the future in order to stay in their homes. And so I give it a 12 hours a day here, just so people have it from their waking moments until they go to sleep. But your mileage may vary depending on what you need for your home if this is something you're considering. This is pretty stable. This is the average cost of a semi-private room in a skilled nursing facility, in a nursing home in Massachusetts per month if you were privately paying. Now, you can apply for Medicaid and utilize Medicaid to subsidize the cost of a nursing home room. So that is something that you would be able to do. There's a lot that goes into that. We could talk for another hour, hour and a half. You would all be asleep if I started talking about the intricacies of Medicaid and elder law and things like that. But if you are interested in learning more about exactly what Medicaid entails and how it works, grab my card on the way out, give me a call later, okay? But if you were paying privately, this is what you could expect to pay on average for a semi-private room in a nursing home. So, other cost considerations. So just to make it even more confusing, and I apologize for this. Remember when I said this was purposely opaque? This is how the industry has set itself up. So, assisted living care is typically classified in one of 3 ways when it comes to the care costs of assisted living. All-inclusive, which if you have a lot of care needs is great, because if your care needs go up over time, your cost is going to remain the same. But if you're going in and you don't need any care, you're kind of prepaying for care because you don't need it, but it's still it's still lumped into your bill. Tiered care levels. This is the most popular type of care level now in the state of Massachusetts. This basically says care level 1 is Mr. Jones needs showering twice a week and medication management and escorts to and from the dining room. Care level 2 is that much more. And there'd be a specific cost associated with each tier of care. Some properties get really evolved with their care levels, where back even a couple years ago it was only like care level 1, 2, and 3. Now I have some properties I work with that get all the way up to care level 7. It does reflect that in the state of Massachusetts, people can stay in assisted living now much longer and take advantage of care services for much longer and stay out of a nursing home environment for that much longer if that's what they desire to do. Now, several communities in Massachusetts work with some type of Medicaid program or some type of affordability program. So these can take a couple of different forms, right? So this can be just a straight Medicaid program. This could be a low income tax credit program. This could be working through the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly, the PACE program. This could be some properties, if they're nonprofits, they may have endowment programs to help depress the cost of care and things like that. So there are a lot of different ways that the properties are trying. They recognize that they're quickly pricing people out of the care ecosystem. So they're trying to figure out ways to help people be able to take advantage of this quality of life that they're providing in these assisted living programs. Now, really important thing I do want to bring up, because this is a point of confusion all the time. Medicare does not cover assisted living at all, not $1, not 1 cent. Medicare will not cover assisted living at all. Medicare, you can apply to your doctor's appointments. So if you're at assisted living and you have a podiatrist appointment or you have a dental appointment or something like that, you can use your Medicare to pay for that. But in the context of assisted living services, Medicare doesn't touch any of that. Medicare can apply in certain circumstances to some portions of nursing home care. Again, under certain circumstances, in a rehab context. We could talk all day about it, and give me a call. Now, Veterans Aid and Attendance is another program which is accepted by all assisted living communities. Some of them accepted under duress, and that's one of the things that I'm here for. If you're a veteran and you find an assisted living property you like and you want to work with them and you qualify for Veterans Aid and Attendance and they're saying, we don't work with Veterans Aid and Attendance, please give me a call. And I'll go and talk to this property and help make sure that they can help you get to yes on this program, because it's a really valuable program. It is an income qualified program. And does everyone here know about Veterans Aid and Attendance? Have you ever heard about it before? Okay. So Veterans Aid and Attendance is a program designed to help defray the cost of care for veterans and their spouses. So if you have questions about it, give me a call. We'll talk a little bit more about what aid and attendance is all about. Another important point, though, all these numbers I showed you before, just please keep in mind that assisted living and home care and nursing home care too, but in our context here, assisted living, governed by landlord-tenant law. They also, which means that they have to go through a whole different landlord-tenant law conversation. If you're ever running low on money and you go, are they going to toss me out? They're going to toss me out in the street. No, they are not. But on the other side, they do have usually a yearly base rent increase. Depending on the property, it could be anywhere from 2% to 10% of their base rent. So this is one of the things my company does is we go out and we interview each assisted living property to get as much information about them as possible to make sure that we know exactly what their prices are, and then we'll furnish that information to you. One of the questions we ask is, what's your average base rent? What's your historical base rent? So that if you find a place you like or you know somebody who does, we can help try and map out what the math will look like, not just now, but in the next couple of years. So that was a lot of information really quick, and you stuck with me, folks. Thanks a lot. So what should you do? Very simple. Just do your research. You owe it to yourself. You never know. You can never circle the day on the calendar when you're going to need to know a little bit more about senior living and senior care. So it doesn't hurt at all to start asking questions and seeing what's out there. You know, that whole saying about an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Same thing here. You know, because I can't tell you how many families call me from bedside of a hospital room or in the lobby of a rehab center or just from this emergent environment where they've now been told either they or their loved ones aren't safe to be home anymore. They need additional care. They need additional services. And the family goes, great, what do I do? What is any of this? What does any of this mean? So to do your research now is only going to arm you for a situation I hope none of you ever have to explore under duress. If you want to go to an assisted living, Great. But let's make that as good an experience as possible. We're refining you that place with the bocce courts and the pickleball and all that stuff, and you're having a blast, and you're rock climbing, and it's great times. Instead of, it's a crisis, and we need to find the best thing we can find right now. Give yourself enough room to explore what the options are out there. And then if you ever need to figure out what's going to be the best for you or a loved one or a friend, at least you've got that list in your hands. And I do this too. I work with people still that I first met back in 2019 when I started the company. So in terms of me, you can all reach out to me anytime you want, and we can have a conversation, and I can help you figure out some of this information and get a list together of places for you so that in the future, if you ever need it, it's there. But you may never need it, or you may call me in 2031 and say, hey, remember us from Walpole? All right, how can I help? And we'll go from there. So being prepared and knowledgeable, it's never a bad thing. Get some references here. And that's me. Thank you very much. All right, so I went a couple minutes longer than I thought, but we still have plenty of time for questions. So who has any questions they may want to ask about anything related to senior care? Yes, sir.
I would just check on a few things in here, okay? Who pays your fee?
Great question.
Great question.
That's a great. No, it's a great question.
And how much you charge?
Gotcha. So, in case you couldn't hear, question was who pays my fee? So, what we did when I first started the company, I first was trying to say, all right, how am I going to do exactly that? Who's going to pay me? And at first I explored a couple of different payment options. And I didn't really like what was happening when I was trying to give people an invoice at the end of our conversations because it just didn't feel like, So instead, what we've done now is we've gone and we've vetted over 600 assisted living properties throughout the region that we work with as our partner network. With this partner network, I've pre-negotiated rates with all of these properties. So if I help somebody move into a property that I've pre-negotiated a rate with, that property pays me. So you would pay me nothing. So we could talk as much as you want, as often as you need. You wouldn't pay me a dime for that. Now, why is it important that I pre-negotiated these rates? Because one of the things that I do as part of my service is I go in and I negotiate prices for my clients. Because all of these prices that we've talked about today in the assisted living context are negotiable, with the exception of care costs. Care costs are not negotiable. Everything else is. So that's how we work, and we aggressively negotiate for our clients, and if you move in paying $0, great. I did my job well. The property still pays us our pre-negotiated rate. Why it's important to have that partner network, and what's a big difference between the Care Concierge and some of the other services out there, is that we don't work with just everyone. And again, I used to be an executive director, so I know when I walk into a building, what is this building operating like? And there's some buildings out there, the most beautiful buildings with the golden chandeliers and the marble countertops and all that stuff, but they don't have any care staff on site and you can't get a call back. And what's the point? If a place isn't going to take care of their primary mission, which is to take care of people, we don't want to work with them. So that's why we only have 600 people in our partner network as opposed to like 800. So good question. Anybody else? Yeah.
I have a question about memory care. So there's Bridges, which is, I think it's an assisted living, but it's also memory care.
It's full memory care.
It's full. So how's that different than skilled nursing?
Great question. Yeah. So the question is about a property up in Westwood, although they have a couple of other properties around too. It's all memory care. And more properties now can approach a nursing home level of care. So it's becoming much more of a blurred line. One of the biggest differentiators in Massachusetts right now between assisted living or memory care assisted living and nursing home is the level of medical care that you need. Assisted living can only get up to a certain level of care, and the nursing home has to take over. Now, I mean, nowadays it's really approaching, if you're requiring certain machinery to maintain day to day. That's a nursing home level of care in Massachusetts when you talk about just purely from a care standpoint. There's one exception to that rule, though, here in Massachusetts, which is a weird quirk, which is being fixed, but it's a weird quirk for right now. In the state of Massachusetts, assisted living communities are not empowered at this time to give injections, which means if you have somebody with a dementia disorder, with diabetes, requires insulin, you have two options. You can either pay privately for a nurse to come in X amount of times a day to administer that insulin, or you have to go to a nursing home. Or they do it themselves, but yeah. Or family comes in and do it, yeah. So, that creates a situation where people may go to a nursing home even though maybe they don't strictly need it because they need the injections, though. So that is being closed. There's a new law that's been signed which will empower assisted livings to provide injections starting next year. But then that turns into a whole staffing issue too, is now they need additional staff, and then that's going to drive the price up, and now we're starting to creep towards what's going to be most cost effective. So it's a complicated scenario there, but that's one thing Massachusetts has done over the past couple of years, especially since the COVID lockdowns, is to try and provide as much care as possible in the assisted living environment, so that if you don't need to move to a nursing home, they don't want you to. But if you absolutely need to, it's usually because you've reached a level of care which is such a need. Yeah, good question. Anybody else?
It's kind of sad because you have some people who perhaps don't make $9,000 a month.
That's right.
So it's sort of for the rich.
Yeah.
Instead of people who make $100,000 a year pension. Whereas the average person does not get $100 a year if they're living on Social Security or.
That's right. I'll tell you, the cost has increased so incredibly much since I even started the Care Concierge 6 years ago. I mean, the last time I updated this presentation for Massachusetts, I went in and at first I thought, oh God, I made a typo. But the last time I updated this presentation, the cost was $2,000 a month less for assisted living, which still, that's still a heavy toll, right? So then the question becomes, all right, how are we going to get people engaged with these programs like Medicaid or PACE or group adult foster care or things like that? So, there are programs that are out there. But I will say this, and it's an imperfect answer, but people are finding that if they're going to go to an assisted living and they have a home to sell, they're selling their home. Yeah. And if they don't, we're getting as creative as we can. Yeah. So the question is, are there any organizations here in Massachusetts that rank assisted livings, top 10 or top 20, anything like that? Not really, because, yeah, right. So there are some organizations that will, they'll create these lists that are like best of senior living or something like that. But then you dig a little deeper and you're like, oh, okay, they paid a fee to be, given that award, things like that. So, my best advice to you on that is take anything you read online about different assisted livings that are the best in the world or best in the state. Take it with a grain of salt. Go see the property yourself if you're interested, or call somebody like me or anybody who does what I do and go with you. And we'll sit down and we'll talk through what is it that's going to make the most sense for you or your family. For some people, they have a non-negotiable. They need to go to an assisted living with a pool. All right? We will only look at assisted livings with pools. Some people could care less about the pool, but they don't want to be anywhere near a city. They want to be as in the woods as possible so that they can walk around the woods and see deer. All right? Let's do that. So the best thing you can do in terms of ranking assisted livings, and just in a general context, is to figure out what are going to be your top 10 criteria. What are going to be the things that are the most important to you or the person you're talking with about what their experience would be with a senior living environment? And then from there, we can start, somebody like me can start narrowing that down and matching that criteria up with the buildings that we've vetted and let you know, all right, these buildings are X, Y, and Z. It is funny. I get in trouble saying this sometimes, but again, sometimes these places that are all over the internet and they've got all these shiny things and commercials and all that stuff, they're the places I get calls from families that are living there saying, we haven't seen anybody in like 3 days. My mom needs help. So take that as you will. Yes.
You were saying that they were getting better at diagnosing dementia versus Alzheimer's and the types of dementia. Is it a detriment to have a diagnosis of Alzheimer's now that we know that there are also closed doors?
No, that's a really great question. So the question was, does it close a door for somebody if they're coming to an assisted living to take a look, or any context, I guess, and they have this diagnosis of Alzheimer's or Lewy bodies or anything like that? The answer is no. And the further answer is it shouldn't. Because Alzheimer's disease, being the most common type of memory disorder, just about every place has a comfort level, such as it is, with helping people with Alzheimer's disease. That being said, there are different types of memory disorders that do have certain symptoms related to more challenging behavioral symptoms. So there are different diseases out there that, unfortunately, a hallmark of some of these diseases may be some really, really disturbing hallucinations or combativeness or things like that. So in those contexts, that takes a little more advocacy on my part in making sure that I'm really digging in and seeing what are the buildings that are, and look, some of these buildings do this. They will just throw a door onto a hallway and say memory care. That's not really memory care. There needs to be a purposefulness behind that. So to be able to dig in and make sure that these places are providing the actual care and training that's necessary to help these people age in place so that they're not saying 3 days after somebody moves in, we can't handle it, we didn't know. Yeah, that takes some advocacy. Yeah. Did you have a question? No. Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. Well, folks, thank you very much again. Feel free, grab whatever you want from the table. And I forgot to introduce, too, the little animatronic dog there. I'll turn him on. His name is Frank. Speaking of memory care, Frank is an animatronic dog that helps people who may want to have a pet, but because of their memory disease, they can't take care of a pet. So we have more information about folks like Frank on my website if you're interested. We got Oscar the cat, too.
Don't have